My apologies to all of you about yesterday. I couldn't miss that appointment with my doctor. And since he had something else, they advanced my appointment. Usually they just cancel it. But since I'm his long-standing, high-paying patient, he decided that he'll see me by advancing my appointment. So sorry about that yesterday. And if you don't mind, we won't have a full-length class today because I am not keeping well, and I have to go to a doctor again for another problem. But that is later. Today there's no. It's just that I have taken 2 classes from 9 o'clock to 11, and I'm kind of slightly tired because of being unwell. So I hope you will forgive me for that. Uh, okay. We were talking about Plato, and we were talking about the idea of the ideal is the real. That was the proposition that we were talking about. And I had told you that as a generation of people, you and I are not the same generation, and at least 2 generations. No, I'm just one generation ahead of you. But even I am post Second World War generation. So you see, after the First World War, the idea of realism and international relations came into being, and that particular uh, realism was first so that was first advocated by E.H. Carr, Carr, E.H. Carr, and later on, you'll see that Reinhold Niebuhr, Reinhold, Reinhold Niebuhr is Niebuhr. Reinhold Niebuhr also advocated a certain kind of realism. Their idea of realism was that somehow conflict was immanent to conflict was immanent to human beings, and we are like other animals, and just as they have animals have territorial conflicts, we also have conflicts over territories, is the idea that was uh, forwarded by Reinhold Niebuhr and E.H. Carr. Um, what happens with this particular idea is that it is cynical, completely cynical about the possibility of the human race living in peace and living in harmony with each other. That is what happens. And then you had the Second World War. And after the Second World War, you have somebody like uh, Hans Morgenthau re-articulating realism. He also believed that you can't live your life in harmony. I had told you that people like Bertrand Russell believed in peace, they believed in social harmony, and they thought there could be a world community. And after India attained independence, you will see that Jawaharlal Nehru also talked about it. And even before uh, India attained independence, Rabindranath Tagore uh, basically uh, talked about the lack of necessity for nation states, so to speak. So he said, if we fight for freedom, we fight for equality. We don't necessarily have to fight for a status of a nation state. So that is what Tagore basically said. And these were considered to be idealists, and their idealism is something that was rejected by the realists. So the idealists and the realists became opposite camps. If you were an idealist, then you were unreal in your thought process. That's what it was. If you're an idealist, you are unreal in your thought process. If you are a realist, then you were all right. You were considering uh, you're basically considering things which have to be considered the way they do. And Morgenthau uh, was somebody who changed the idea to national interest. Since then, even if you're studying foreign policy, people will tell you that foreign policy of a nation is an extension of its domestic policy. So what does that mean? It means that domestic policy is that you are looking at how good things are, what is good for the country. And depending upon that, you will basically have a foreign policy. So if you actually look at, if you actually look at, what should I say, um, what was happening or what is happening today, ever since the Galwan incident between China and between China and India. India has been saying boycott Chinese goods. So somehow uh, you will say that my policy towards China is dictated by what is happening internally in my country. And uh, another example is that whatever uh, foreign policy we have towards a particular nation, like for example, Pakistan, we say that we will not have friendly relations with Pakistan because it is promoting cross-border terrorism. So you can see both sides here. Pakistan is promoting cross-border terrorism, which is its foreign policy in a way, uh, for the sake of uh, perpetuating its own interest. India is following an anti-Pakistan foreign policy because it is affecting us domestically. So the idea of national interest guiding relations between countries and the possibilities of war, all of these were realism. So since we have been brought up on this kind of a language, suddenly when you hear somebody like Plato say the ideal is the real, it is almost like he's saying the good is the bad, okay, which are two opposite categories, right? Good and bad. So how can good be bad? If it is bad, then why have good? That is the question. So if you say the ideal is the real, then it stumps a lot of people. And they basically say that Plato is unreal in his thought process. But nothing can be farther from the truth. I hope you remember what did I talk to you about Parmenides? Somebody? Did I talk to you about Parmenides? Yeah. So if I spoke to you, no, not influence, about Parmenides. I'll talk about the influence now. And so Parmenides, let me just give you a brief this thing on Parmenides so that you make the connection with Plato. Parmenides was somebody who believed in uh, two things. One, he said, is uh, knowledge comes from the way of the truth written with a capital T. And the other thing he also said is distortions and illusions, and therefore wrong knowledge comes from studying appearances. So he was going against the Milesians who believed that you had to study the world which is outside of you. For Parmenides, nothing moved. Okay? Nothing moved. All things in the world were unmoving. And he basically says that all movement is because of viewing the world as appearances, and therefore it is illusory. So let me just give you a small little example. Uh, the example is that if you take mountain ranges anywhere in the world, whether it is the Andes or the Rockies, in India, Aravalli Hills, Vindhya Hills, and Himalayas are relatively young. So all these things, if you look at, uh, you get the picture that these have not moved. Where have they moved? They have been where they are. They have always been where they are. So that is basically what uh, is being propagated by Parmenides. Things don't have a necessity for movement. And in his debates with Heraclitus, who famously said, you cannot step into the same river twice. Okay, so for him, everything was in a state of flux. Everything was fluid, moving. And Parmenides disagreed with him. He said, if I cannot step into the same river twice, are you trying to tell me that the river that I first stepped into is different from the river that I am trying to step into a second time? Is that another river? It's the same river. If it's the same river, that basically means there's no movement. Okay. So he therefore held that, and I want you to remember this, uh, he held that the world is a completeness. It's a whole, WHOLE. It's a whole, a completeness, and therefore it doesn't require the necessity to move. Okay? It doesn't require the necessity to move. Now, this is one of the influences on Plato, and this we will invoke it when we talk about how the ideal is real. Did I talk to you about Protagoras? Anyone? Gnosticism and Protagoras, I spoke to you, right? Yeah. So Protagoras, for instance, uh, was somebody who was a bit of a recondite person. Recondite because while everybody believed in gods, he didn't believe in God, in the Greek gods. He believed in what is today called a lesser god, called demiurge, Demiurge, demiurge. Uh, that is considered to be a cult god by some, considered to be a lesser god by others. Now, please remember this also, because this is another influence that you will see on Plato. Third influence that you will see on Plato when he's talking about the ideal is the real. In the philosophical way, these are all in the philosophical sense, even though some of them are abstruse, but they are definitely philosophical. Uh, Another important influence on Plato is the Peloponnesian War, which was fought in the province of Peloponnese between the Greeks, the Athenians and the Spartans, and where uh, Sparta defeated Athens. And after that, there was the very famous oration or speech by Pericles. Pericles was the leader of the Athenians, and he basically emphasized on a few points about how Athens, or about why Athens lost the war. So we will basically be looking at how all these different influences, the influences on Plato are eclectic. Eclecticism is, sources which are different, dissimilar, not just different. You can have two different things which are similar, but if you have two different sources which are dissimilar, then that becomes eclectic. Eclectic, lots of C's. Eclectic. So the influences on Plato are eclectic. Then the most important when it comes to the idea of the ideal being the real, the biggest influence on Plato would be mathematics and Pythagoras. Please remember that for the ancient Greeks, uh, mathematics and philosophy were not two different things. In fact, most of the philosophers of ancient Greece, with the exception perhaps of Aristotle, uh, but definitely including Plato, were all mathematicians. We know Plato as a philosopher. We study him as a political philosopher. But the fact of the matter is, Plato was also a brilliant mathematician. That is something that very few people know. Very few people teach in classes. Uh, People will also not tell you when you're doing, say, somebody like Hobbes. Hobbes wanted to model himself on the lines of Greek philosophers. So he tried to project himself as some kind of a mathematician, which was actually, strictly speaking, a very pathetic attempt. He was not a mathematician in any sense of the term. Even in the loosest sense of the term, he wasn't. But he tried to project himself that way because he was trying to go back to the Greek period and, count himself along with the likes of Pythagoras, Plato, even Socrates. So if you look at the influence of mathematics and the influence of Pythagoras, then you will see that Plato's eclecticism is complete. Did we do Pythagoras and his influence? Somebody? The influence of Pythagoras on Plato? No? Okay. We did. Okay. Is it we did or we didn't? I think we did. I remember having done it. Yeah. Now, the influence of Pythagoras, when we talked about Pythagoras, we talked about various things about him. And one of the things that we talked about was his idea of crypts, 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 and the idea of the soul. Okay, now ancient Indians believed that the universe was a living system and that everything in the universe had life. There was nothing non-living in the universe. Okay, so according to the ancient Indians, even grains of sand, rocks, all these things which we consider to be non-living are living, and they have souls. They have souls. Uh, so everything in this universe for Indians had a soul. But for the Greeks, and specifically for Pythagoras, the soul was the exclusive uh, preserve of the, what should I say, exclusive preserve of uh, human beings. Non-human beings, even if they were living creatures, did not have souls. So that is why he formed these secret cults, secret groups, and he called them crypts, and he created that system of blood brothers, which I talked to you about. So I'm not going to repeat that now. So he basically believed that if you became blood brothers, if you formed into a crypt and became a blood brother, then when you're born again, you will be born as blood brothers. Because the bonding that he's talking about as brothers is not the bonding of bodies, but he's talking about the bonding of souls. The body is a medium for the souls to bond together. So the soul is for him the important thing. The body is just a medium. Now, when it comes to Plato, this particular idea is something that acquires a great significance for Plato and for the readers of Plato. Plato also believed in souls. Plato also believed in rebirth. Plato also believed that only human beings had souls. Okay? And those influences basically are very necessary for us to understand why or what he meant by the ideal being the real. So, before exploring the ideal being the real, I will have to talk to you about Plato's theory of forms. 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 Not theory of forms, sorry. It's the Plato's realm of forms. REALM, realm of forms. Uh, and this is, like I told you the other day, it is very, very different from Aristotle's theory of form. Aristotle also had a theory of form, but he used form in the singular, whereas Plato talks about it in plural. While for Aristotle it is a theory, for Plato it is a realm. A realm is something that exists somewhere. Now, Plato believed that since we were talking of life and death, he believed that after death, the souls, which he called forms, okay? So for him, the form is the real thing. The body is not the real thing. The soul is the form. That is the real thing. So this form or soul goes to what he called the realm of souls. A realm of souls is where all souls went in between their death and rebirth. Not the death of the soul, the death of the body, and the rebirth in another body. In between that, in the interregnum between that, they went to the realm of the forms. So what happens in the realm of the forms? Do souls just go there and do they sit there and have fun, or do they do something else? For Plato, the realm of the forms is where the souls interact with each other. And in the interaction that the souls do in the realm of the forms, they basically learn the correct things. They attain knowledge. Please keep this point in mind. It is significant. They attain reliable and perfect knowledge in the form of souls in the realm of souls. So, in the realm of souls, the soul is alive. It has a mind. In fact, for Plato, the soul is the mind. Okay? So, the soul picks up knowledge with each death and rebirth, and with the time that it spends in the realm of the forms, every soul will be getting enriched. So, what is the significance of this? The significance of this is that Plato basically believed, and he was projecting the idea that the true knowledge is the repository of the soul. It is the repository of the soul, or rather, I'm sorry, I got it the other way around. The soul is the repository of the true knowledge. And since the soul is also the mind, he says, when you're born, you're not born uh, as a, you're not born without any knowledge about something, without knowledge about something. So he believes that knowledge is innate, I-N-N-A-T-E. Innate knowledge is knowledge that is inborn. So what exactly is he saying? He is saying that when we are born, we are not born without knowledge. We are born with knowledge. This, if you contrast with modern philosophy and the seminal philosophy that is John Locke's in the modern period, in an essay concerning human understanding, uh, John Locke made the claim that when we are born, our mind is empty. He called it, he used a Latin phrase The Latin phrase that he used is tabula rasa, Tabula, tabula rasa, Rasa. Tabula, when translated into English, will mean a tablet. Let's be careful about our understanding of tablet. It's not the pills that somebody like me pops one after another tablet. Not those tablets. A tablet is something that is a piece of stone on which people carved writings. Okay, so this is pre-paper. This is how it was done. So a tabula rasa was, for him, the mind is an empty tablet, and it is through sense perception. You know what the senses are: sense of touch, sense of smell, sense of taste, all the five senses. They send data into the mind, and it is through our interaction with the external world and through the usage of our senses, we internalize the external world. That's what John Locke says. But this is exactly the opposite of what Plato said. Plato said, we are not born with empty minds. We are born with knowledge, innate knowledge, and not simple knowledge, but with complicated knowledge. So when we are born itself, we already have knowledge. But a caveat here. The caveat is everybody is not born with the same amount of knowledge. Who has how much knowledge depends on the ability of the soul to recollect what was what it learned, rather, I'm sorry, what it learned in the realm of forms, what it learned, how much of it a soul could recollect, decided how much somebody knew. So everybody didn't know uh, the same amount. Everybody didn't have the same amount of knowledge. It varied. But knowledge is purely mental. It has nothing to do with the senses. It has nothing to do with the body. It has nothing to do with experiences. Everything that is there in your mind is something that you have learnt in the realm of the forms, and therefore it is there in your mind. Now, if any of you is thinking, what kind of rubbish is Plato speaking? Let me give you an example from our own times. I don't know how many of you have heard of Noam Chomsky, Noam, Noam, Chomsky. Chomsky. Noam Chomsky started his career as a professor of linguistics, and he was one of the most brilliant professors in linguistics. Now he's become a political activist. He's the anti system activist in America. He believes that American attempts at world hegemony are not good, but he wasn't always that. These days, people study Chomsky in political science, but his origins were as a professor in linguistics. While he was a professor of linguistics, Chomsky made an amazing argument, which is a defense of what Plato says when he says we are born with knowledge. What Chomsky says is that when we are born, there are structures of language in our minds. And Chomsky is a structuralist. A structuralist is one who believes that knowledge has one structure. It could be about different things, but since it is expressed through the medium of language, it is one structure. So what is Chomsky's argument? He says we don't acquire knowledge of languages after we are born. We are born with structure of language built into our brains, into our minds. Brain and mind are two different things. So what exactly does he mean by we are born with structures of language? He asks you this question, a very simple question. He says, if your father is Spanish and your mother is French, and if you are brought up in an English family, what language will you learn first? The first language that you will learn, people will say, is English. Chomsky says it's not learning. You activate the structure of language as English because that is what you are exposed to. Then he asks you another question. How is it possible for us to speak many languages? There are people who can speak 12 languages, 10 languages. Our very own Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao was somebody who knew 15 languages. So how did he know 15 languages? simply because the structure of the language is the same. The difference lies in the way in which sounds are emitted. So for Chomsky, language is thought. The primary form of language is thought. The secondary form of language is the sound. How you express that thought through the utterances of different kinds of sounds. So when the structure is the same, you can very easily being exposed to different languages, you can pick up as many languages as possible, because the difference is only in the way in which you utter the sounds. I don't have children, but quite a few of my friends have children. And these people, uh, my friends that is, they are, mother is a Tamilian, father is a Gujarati, and the child that they have can speak both Gujarati and Tamil. Once the child starts going to school, the child is capable of learning English, of learning Hindi, and if there is another language to learn, they are capable of learning. But what I am trying to say is, most of my friends are not people who are, the wife and husband are not speakers of the same language. They are two different language speakers. So what we find is that their children, by the time they're 3 years or 4 years, and they go to school, by then they are capable of speaking 4 languages. So it's inbuilt. Knowledge of language is built into your mind. It is not acquired. It is not acquired. That is the kind of argument that Plato is making. Knowledge is already there. He's not talking only about linguistics. He's talking about other things. Knowledge is there right from the time when you're born. So I'll stop here today. We'll continue with this argument tomorrow, because if I start this, it will have to go for some more time. I need to get ready and get out of the house. So thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow, 11 o'clock. Thank you.